Talk to us now and go to the TNT Radio Interactive Live chat room at tntradio.live. Lighting the fuse for freedom. Today's News Talk Radio, TNT. Matt Ehret and Connecting the Dots on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
All right, welcome to this week's episode of Connecting the Dots on TNT Radio. I'm your host, Matt Ehret. With me today as our first guest is V the Guerrilla economist, my good friend, co-host of a weekly show on Rogue News, and he's the founder of Rogue News. He does regular broadcasts there, and he also oversees Amparo, which people can go to his website. We'll talk a little bit more about Amparo and what V's doing there. But V is a geo-economic analyst, somebody with a good understanding of historic dynamics, an appreciation for a lot of the things that other people tend to ignore regarding what's going on behind the scenes and what's going on behind the statistics when we look in or we're told that something has happened on NASDAQ. He's always looking at, well, what are the physical realities behind the shadows of the math? So I really appreciate talking to V. Thank you for joining us. We got a lot to go through today.
Matt, it's a pleasure to be on with you, and every time I'm on with you, it's always a lot. I enjoy it. So lots of things going on in the world. I mean, my God, we are the distress of the nation, so to speak. So I don't know where you want to start.
I would not have expected it. And that's actually the first thing I want to sort of ask you about today. I mean, we're not going to jump straight into the geo-economic thing necessarily, but obviously the economic meltdown of the U.S., the danger of the meltdown of the transatlantic, the danger of ungovernability amongst nations that we thought were stable is something which we've been talking about for years and years. Here we're living through the breakdown on many levels. But one thing I didn't expect last week was, or even a few days ago, I don't think too many people anticipated this was going to accelerate to this extent, is what's going on in Texas. Governor Greg Abbott just invoked Article 1, Section 10 to deal with the border invasion. Obviously, I personally have mixed feelings about all of this. I don't know why he didn't wait a little bit longer, because there is a presidential race. If he believes Trump is going to win, I don't know why he didn't withhold what could escalate into something that gets out of control, where 25 other states have joined in and given support that could feasibly lead to some sort of a conflagration with federal authorities. I don't know. That being said, it is a giant mess, and I feel some satisfaction about a state actually using its rights to say something should get done. What is your take on what's going on right now?
That's a good question. You know, a colleague of mine said it best. He says, I'll take this seriously when they start arresting federal agents and IRS agents in those respective Republican-controlled states. Until that happens, he said he's not going to get too excited about it. I laughed and chuckled at that because I thought that was kind of hilarious. But it kind of does make a point. Is this some sort of political theater? Is this some sort of, a grand distraction, right? Or is this some sort of a setup to a bigger confrontation between federal authorities and states' rights? And just like you, Matthew, I'm an advocate for states' rights. I think states have a responsibility to defend themselves and do what is best to protect their citizenry. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, well, you made a great point. Why now? Why now? People, look, being a kid growing up in the United States in the early 80s, I'll tell you right now, I've been hearing about 11 million illegals in this country for my entire life. I'm 44 today, right? For the entire duration of my lifetime, I've been hearing we have 11 million illegals every year. I don't believe that anymore. I think the number is probably closer to 40 million, maybe slightly more, okay? So we have this massive buildup of illegals. We have this huge swarm that's coming across month after month for the last 3 years. Why is Abbott doing this now? It's not like he all of a sudden, oh, guess what, guys? Look, there's a law in the Texas books that allows us to defend our own borders. Let's utilize that. What a brilliant idea. You know, that's a very good question. And I'm not exactly sure as to why now, right? So knowing that there's a law in the books, knowing that he executes this order right now, the bigger question is, why now? And what are they distracting us from is the second question I always ask myself. And number three, you know, there are elements within the United States that would love to see the United States fracture, that would love to see the United States fall into a civil war. look, I want the deep state gone as much as the next man. I want the unelected bureaucracy, the absolute disgusting vultures that are in Washington, D.C. gone as much as the next guy. But at the same time, as the United States goes through this transition, especially economically, we are heading for a collapse. You want the United States intact. You want the United States to be a great country amongst other great countries. If you fracture the United States, or you divide us in two, I don't know how that's going to fit into the broader multipolar world. I think a divided United States is more problematic to the peace and stability in a multipolar reality, because you can't have a divided country like this where, you have this fractured, divided country. It's in civil war, and we got 5,000 nukes. That's a problem for the broader world to handle. So there's a lot of questions I have as to why this is going on right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I was thinking a little bit about what was the motive catalyzer behind this decision now. And one of the things that popped up in all the news feeds is this letter. You've probably heard about this letter written by 10 former FBI agents. And when I looked at the list of these agents,
we can trust them, Matt.
Yeah, right. And I mean, like, you're looking at who are these people? When these are not just FBI agent whistleblowers. These are people who are like Kevin Brock, the former acting director of intelligence and deputy director of national counterterrorism. It's Timothy Healy, the former director of terrorist screening centers across America. Tim McNally, the assistant director for the FBI LA division. I mean, these are very high level people, very, very high up in the higher initiated process in an agency that we have known has been a core base of the fifth column deep state going back to the murder of JFK and before that. And it didn't get less deep statey. So it's like these guys are the ones warning that you have like all of these terrorists infiltrating within the young male illegal immigrant population, and thus that has been used as the reason for why the border at this moment you're getting this issue spring up. And I agree that there are like shady elements coming through, but at the same time, if you think about the real reason why there's been all of these terrorist actions in America, it wouldn't happen were it not for the coordination and carrying out primarily of the CIA, the FBI themselves, not because of, I don't think there's any cases of just, immigrants just coming in and saying, I hate McDonald's and American liberty so much, and I'm just going to do this. I'm going to destroy the country that's giving me free money. It's usually that they're being, used, if anything, as a front for these guys, the agencies that these guys are working for, who are the ones writing this letter. So why they're acting like they're the patriots, or we're being told that these FBI agents are the patriots, is for me again another shady alarm bell that rings in my head. On top of what you've just said, that there are certain forces that would love to see a civil war in the United States.
Yeah.
So
absolutely right, man. That's the whole entire thing. Look at the narrative. One of the hallmarks of the deep state is their tired, worn out, used tropes that they use over and over and over again. In this border crisis, we're witnessing the same thing, right? All of a sudden, we have this border crisis. Now they're saying there are Islamic terrorists that are coming in. They're infiltrating us. We must stop them. We found prayer rugs in the middle of the Mexican desert near the California border or the Texas border. They're clearly coming over. We found it in Arizona, and so on and so forth. At the same time, the issues that are happening in the Red Sea, the same time where you have neocons who've been pushing this "we need to attack Iran" nonsense for the last several decades at this point. So the timing is very, very convenient. Because you gotta understand, man, the FBI from the bottom foundation to the topmost stone, it is a corrupt agency. People are like, oh, there's some good guys there. No, there is no good guys there. Stop it. Yeah, there were some good guys with the Nazis too. But you got to understand, it's like the good guys, their whole point is to keep the bureaucracy. In order to absolutely change the culture of the FBI, you have to end the FBI. It has to be purged. It has to be remade into something new. Just like the OSS was destroyed. And then they created the civilian CIA, which was 1,000 times worse, right? The OSS was gone. But So the same thing occurs here, where you can't trust these guys. You cannot trust these FBI experts. The same, like you said, these are sheep-dipped deep staters who've lied. All they do is lie. They lie to you about everything. But now they're like, oh, trust us. There's some military-age men coming across. I'm like, I looked at, and the funniest thing is when they try to put these supposed Chinese migrants on the border. Supposed, and I say supposed because God knows where they're from. They're like, these are military-age fighting men. I look at some of these skinny, out of shape, fat guys, who are just coming here for work, right? And they're putting this into the American psyche because they're trying to create a narrative. So if they do set off a false flag, aha, we have an Iranian proxy Hezbollah group here working hand in hand with Chinese terror cells to attack us here. This is the sick, twisted mind of the neocon here in the United States. And they're dumb enough to do something stupid like that. And there are idiots in this country that actually believe this nonsense and then start to peddle it all across the entire nation, So that potentiality is there without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, absolutely. Now, what on that note, what do you think is recently we've heard from the South. Let's just shift gears a little bit to the international space a bit. Just yesterday or the day before, there was the International Court of Justice that ruled kind of in favor of South Africa regarding their claims or their desire to try to demonstrate and get international recognition that there is a genocide that is intended, that is ongoing in Gaza. And there was sort of a mini win where the justices there at the ICJ did rule saying that, no, there is evidence of a genocide. They asked that Israel stop. They didn't ask for a ceasefire, mind you. So there's a little bit of a weakness in the victory celebrations there. But despite that, Bibi Netanyahu came out saying, no, we're not going to stop. And he even went further this week saying that Iran is a legitimate target of attack since it is at the heart of the snake. What are your thoughts regarding the ICJ's decision and the outcome there? And is there really an increased danger at all of an attack on Iran?
The ICJ decision, if it was a very limp-wristed, half-hearted decision, right? It was a little slap on the wrist. Oh, they didn't want to say anything that was too much of an affront to Israel and to the Western oligarchs that are in the ICJ. Will there be? But the thing is this: I think when you look at it from the other angle, the victory, the small victory, the tiny little victory that South Africa got, it lends credence, it lends legitimacy to this whole entire claim that what Israel's doing is insane. Now, Israel being run by a maniac, a war criminal named Netanyahu. Netanyahu, because he's nuts, right? Netanyahu, this is a guy in trouble. This is a guy where one of the Israeli defense ministers is like, look, the biggest threat to Israel is not Hamas, it's Netanyahu. He needs to go. He's destroying the country. Israel's economy is in tatters. It's always been in tatters. It's a welfare state. Now you have the situation here where Netanyahu, he can't let off. Okay, he can't let off. He's gonna try and go full force with this. But the funny thing is, the IDF is a caricature of what it once was back in 40, 50 years ago. This is and Scott Ritter does a great job explaining this. Andre Martinov does a great job explaining this. Colonel Douglas McGregor does a great job explaining this. The IDF is a shell army run by kids. That's who they are, and they are getting smoked by Hamas in every major conflict that's happening right now. And look, here's the thing: Hezbollah has not entered the fray. So if Israel's stupid enough, and there are people that are in the West, generals in the West saying, don't do this, let's not create a greater regional crisis and a regional war, let's not do this. Because the most dangerous thing in the world is a country or a group of people that believes their own BS. And unfortunately, much of Western countries, they believe their own BS.
Mhm.
America believes its own BS. We're the city on the hill. We're the largest superpower in the world. We are the greatest economy and blah, blah, blah. All lies. We're a marketing scheme that props up a Ponzi scheme. That is all what the United States is. Israel is really no different. Okay, it is a criminal organization. The Likud is a criminal party. The Knesset is absolutely corrupt. And what it is that they do, if they ever go to war with Iran, Iran will end them. The only thing Israel will then do, because they're nut jobs, is the question. Actually, it was a question: will they do the Samson option, which is they set off the nukes, they end themselves as well as their enemies? I don't think they're that crazy, because over the last several decades, I have a good buddy of mine who served in the IDF. I had a few friends of mine that went through the IDF, and for years they were telling me, "Man, they're like, V, the IDF is a joke. You have guys who are coming on as trainees. I'm training them. Their mothers would call me complaining that I'm pushing them too hard and that they want their little sonny boys to no longer be in this level of basic training, to go for a more cushier position as such and such a job, looking at surveillance. Surveillance. And one of the things that was told to me was that there is no surveillance. These kids are always on Instagram and TikTok, looking at vids, updating their social media profile when they should be watching the borders. So people are like, oh my God, this must be a planned false flag because Israel has the most secure borders in the world. No, it's watched by retarded kids. That's who watches Israel's borders. So when you have retarded kids watching Israel's borders who are too busy updating their social media profile, of course there's going to be an attack. But they didn't think that attack was going to happen. Why? Because they believe the Western bullshit, which is, you know what? Nothing's going to happen to us. Hamas is not stupid. We are the greatest army in the entire Middle East. We're the most vaunted fighting force. Nothing can beat us, even though they've lost against Hezbollah not once but twice. Even though they've failed in quelling Hamas not once but several times, it doesn't stop them. So now Netanyahu is like, we had to push towards Iran. These people are sick. They're sick.
Yeah. No, I think that you've really hit the nail on the head. That at the end of the day, when you start consuming your own drugs, you're going to misstep galore, and that's what is really contaminating all of the thinking of the auxiliaries, the people who have been like assigned to positions of the guardians of Western civilization, is that they've been put through themselves the pool of mediocrity that was designed to make the victims of the oligarchy become dumber and more compliant and more easy to manage by becoming more decadent, more simple-minded, more soft-minded. That's actually also affected the Bidens, the Justin Trudeaus, the kids who are being assigned to be the guardians of places like Israel, the bastion of democracy in the Middle East. So I think you've hit the nail on the head pretty well. There's obviously a coexistence of something very evil at the core of this whole operation, but that's a really important Achilles heel for people to hold in mind. We're going to go for a quick commercial break, and we're going to come right back on TNTRadio.live.
TNT, Sonia Poulton.
You feel the need to describe yourself, along with being a useless eater, free speech isn't a phobia, as a male with a penis. Why would you feel the need to describe yourself as such?
Well, you never know these days, do you? Anyone can have a penis, apparently, so just thought you better make sure everybody knows.
And that is the reality, isn't it? Words have lost all meaning. And one of the things that I wanted you to come and join me about and comment about is the whole issue of gender and transgenderism. Are you cis, Jack?
No. There's no such thing. There was literally no such thing till a couple of years ago, and it's their religion, it's not mine, and I refuse to get involved with this sort of terminology. It's ridiculous.
Sonia Poulton on today's News Talk, TNT.
Take us back in time. And who was Mike Flynn?
He was the National Security Advisor to the president.
Why is it that they go after me so hard? And why me? Why does Barack Obama only talk about two people, to the incoming president of the United States?
When I was sentenced, the judge says, you have been convicted of lying to cover up for Donald Trump. To which I say, cover up what? Russian collusion? There was no Russian collusion to cover up.
We see in today's current scenario with President Joe Biden, who came in with high expectations, that he has been viewed as divisive.
And we're committed to advancing transgender equality in the classroom.
The liberal media say, well, this is his love for his son, and yes, he's going to protect his son. But let me tell you, a lot of fathers love their sons, but their sons had to go to jail when they broke the law.
This moment, people see a lot of those telltale signs of a far left drift to the country.
Whether you're talking about socialism or you're talking about communism, socialism is just a kinder cousin of communism, but the goal is the same, for the state to have control of every aspect of your life.
We have multiple hearings on different agencies that have actually just gone rogue. They took fewer men in the takedown of El Chapo than they did to arrest me.
And Comey went back to his organization and brought his other thugs together to basically give them the ground rules. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. And now I need some ideas about how to execute this, basically this act of treason.
I think we all know, James Comey, that you're a great storyteller because you made up the entire story about Crossfire Hurricane. So it's really fitting that a criminal like yourself wrote a crime novel. You remember me? Remember me from your book signing?
It doesn't matter whether they're Republican or Democrat. People will sell their soul to obtain an ounce of political power in Washington, D.C.
I don't even know that draining the swamp is the appropriate metaphor anymore after what we've seen these last 4 years. We need basically an exorcism in Washington, D.C.
When, Satan is tempting Jesus in the desert, I'll give you all the riches of the world. I'll give you everything. All you have to do is bow to me. That's what Barack Obama has done. That's what Jim Comey has done. That's what these bastards have done.
The Fall of Deceit at salemnow.com.
Are we on the air?
Am I on the air?
You're on the air?
On the air 24/7. Your news talk giant, TNT.
All right, we're back for the second segment of the first hour of Connecting the Dots on TNT Radio. I'm here with VJ Varghese, the Guerrilla, the economist, as he is known by his fans far and wide. Now, V, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the de-dollarization issue, the collapse of the U.S. dollar, what can be done feasibly, but also how it's unfolding. Recently, the Chinese Treasury, I just saw a statistic on Zero Hedge that there's been a 40% drop of U.S. holdings by the Chinese Treasury over last year's figure around the same time. Spikes in gold, obviously buying up massive amounts of gold by Russia, China, and other countries of Eurasia. Then there's also discussions of U.S. confiscation, also European confiscation of Russian assets, $300 billion of which are sitting in European and American banks. What's your take on this? Do you think that that the U.S. dollar can be saved at this point, or is this going in a no? It can't really.
No. We're at a stage, and I told my clients this, and around the world, and I deal with a lot of institutions, a lot of high net worth individuals, and one of the things I said is that we're in a trajectory, guys. We are in a trajectory. There's no escaping this, and I said this 3 years ago, right? This trajectory that we're on right now. They have made the dollar the de facto most toxic, most dangerous asset you could hold if you're a foreign country. Because every country in the world woke up the day they put in sanctions on Russia. And they said to themselves, you know what? Today is Russia. Tomorrow it's me. We're done holding this. And this is when you've seen an acceleration of swap facilities, right? Of currency swap facilities that are occurring all throughout the world right now. That is accelerated at an exponential factor, okay, magnitudes. And it's done because why do I want to take the dollar? I mean, Sergei Lavrov said it best. He said the United States is agreement non-capable. Perfectly said. Agreement non-capable. So if I want to do business with a country where I can have a good relationship with this country, I can have a good relationship with the administration of this country, and then next 4 years, somebody new comes in, and the treaties that I've signed in place and the agreements that I have in place can all be shredded up on a whim. That's problematic. It doesn't work. And with every action the United States does, we're going to use $300 billion to rebuild Ukraine. We all know that $300 billion will not be used to rebuild Ukraine. We all know $300 billion will be dispersed to a lot of politicians and to a lot of individuals within the defense contracting world And I'm not even going to talk about how it's also going to be dispersed into narco trafficking, human trafficking, and the like. I mean, when the whole Ukraine thing happened, one of the things I wrote an article on detailed that. And so the world sees this. The world's woken up. And this is the problem when a nation believes its own BS, they actually think they have some sort of credibility in what they say. The world's woken up to the fact that, hey, you know what? We're not going to use their dollar. We all know that they're going to take their dollar. This is all for money laundering purposes. They're going to launder it into their own coffers. So what the United States is doing, the number one destroyer, you talk to an American politician, China's the biggest currency manipulator. They're attacking our dollar because the Chinese hate us for our freedom, blah, blah, blah. The number one destroyer of the United States dollar is the United States. The number one manipulator of currency on a global scale is the United States. The number one house that is involved in economic fraud throughout the world is the United States, man. And that's the issue. And the world got along with it because it's like you're being like a remora, one of those remora fishes swimming under the mouth of a great white shark. And you were fine with it because whatever the great white eats, you're going to get some of those crumbs and you get to lap up a little bit. So all the lackeys that followed the West, that followed the United States, they were quite content eating the scraps that the shark was devouring. They don't realize that the great white shark called the United States wound up in a lagoon filled with killer whales. China, Russia, and the other countries that are joining up to it. Now it's a problem. Now it's like, hey, you know what? I don't feel so safe swimming with this great white anymore. It might eat me. And this is what's happening right now, where you're seeing this entire global shift. And it's all because it's been done by the United States. If there's anybody to blame, it is the U.S. And I'll tell you right now, having world reserve currency status is an incredible responsibility. And just as the English, the British did it to themselves, how they lost that, the United States is also in the process of losing it. The great, we talk about the Suez moment for the British, right? Where it was the end of that war they fought in the Suez Canal. That was known as the Suez moment. It was the end of the British Empire at that point. America's Suez moment was back in October of 2021 or 2022 or whatever, where a C-17 Globemaster was lifting up off of the ground in Kabul Air Base or Kabul Airport with Afghans hanging onto it. That was it. That was the greatest symbol, more than the UH-1 Bell Huey on top of the American embassy in Saigon. Okay? That was an emblematic symbol of the end of America's war, the 38th parallel. But seeing a C-17 Globemaster with the Afghanis hanging on for dear life, man, that was it. That, to me, was the end of it. And so the United States right now, we're in a trajectory. There's no escaping this. There's no one person that could save this. There's no Republican or Democrat that's got the cojones, the backbone to stop what is going to be inevitable. And the economic collapse, I've always said this to my clientele for the longest time, the economic collapse of the United States is not good or bad. It's inevitable, and it's necessary. The question we all need to have is, once this collapse occurs and that vacuum is created, who steps into the vacuum? Is it going to be the deep state, the liars, the charlatans, the crooks, the Satanists, the pedophiles? Will it be them again? Or will it be the American people? Will we go back to the vision of 1776? Or are we stepping into a psychopathic dream that is an amalgam of 1984 and a brave new world? That choice is going to be left to the American people, Matt.
No, it's a very stark, but very, very down to earth, rational, pragmatic assessment, I think. But on that note, obviously the deep state currently is and has been very, very stressed out about the possibility of the only thing that I see personally as being if the U.S. is going to survive, it's only because the only viable thing that I see within the U.S. at this point is within the Republican Party, mostly around the MAGA Republicans, as they would be called, who have the type of perhaps they're not necessarily the most informed intellectually about the world. There's a lot of misinformation, but there's a morality within this community, which is, I would say, increasingly the majority of the voices of adult citizens in America. But they currently have a champion in the form of Donald Trump, who it seems has, despite a lot of odds, endured and overcome quite a bit. I'm amazed in some ways that he's still alive, and I guess that's because he's able to pay for his own security detail and he seems to have some support. But do you think that even were, let's say, America to avoid a civil war and make it to the election, and let's say all of the vote fraud, which we know is part of the package of what the Soros Malik Brown operation has been in electric voting machines, all of that. Let's say we overcome all of that and we're able to get in a Trump presidency. Let's say all of that happens. Do you think that the collapse is still going to be inevitable, or do you think that there are things that could be done to circumvent the type of mass death and chaos that would unfold with the breakdown of the U.S. and potentially transatlantic economy with that?
I think the collapse is still going to occur, but it won't be as bad. The analogy I like to give is an airplane. You're in, let's just say, an Airbus A350. Okay, you're in an Airbus A350 or a Boeing 777. Forget Boeing. Let's go with the Airbus. We're in an Airbus A350. You got engine failure. Yeah. You got engine failure, right? Engine 1, engine 2 is engine 1 is done. Engine 2 is running on 50% power. You're descending. You have before you two options. If you veer to the right, you're going to hit the mountain. You're all going to die. You're all going to die. You veer to the left, you crash land in the rice paddy. You'll live. You'll have a nice smooth glide in. It's a long enough rice paddy, followed by maybe a very soft soil. You'll have a nice, comfortable landing. It won't be too hard. It won't be too bad. You'll just bring it in. If Trump wins, we're going to go into a controlled crash that is into the rice paddy. At that point, the dollar will be revalued. We'll probably, and the murmurings that I'm hearing when I talk to some of my guys that are on the institutional side that are very connected individuals, the murmurings that I'm hearing is the idea to have the dollar pegged to the energy that's here in the United States, the energy commodities, the hydrocarbons that are in the ground in the United States, to have a real petrodollar, real energy-backed dollar, right? And then reinvigorate the economy through an infrastructure deal that has to be done with both the Chinese on the infrastructure side, and for the energy side, there's nobody better than the Russians. Nobody more experienced than the Russians when it comes to next generation drilling and fracking and what needs to be done for energy. So that type of partnership is being talked about in some of the back rooms in private equity. That's the goal. That's the hope. That's the dream. But just like when you're crash landing the plane into a soft rice paddy, you can bet there's going to be structural things that will break. I believe there'll be massive supply chain disruptions in many parts of the country. I think a lot of states will have to reindustrialize or re-agriculture themselves in order to supply themselves their own food and their own energy, their own supply chain to fill the void of what is going to happen. There's going to be issues in a lot of the large cities. I see rioting occurring in places like New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago. Any of these large cities will go into utter lawlessness. I can see probably some martial law being declared in areas such as that to bring the crowds back in control. But when this occurs, the desire, and this is, again, these are some of the conversations that are happening with private equity. The desire that is being wargamed here is that when we do go through this crash, is to have a massive reinvigoration for shovel-ready infrastructure jobs that will put people to work immediately, just take up the slack from what has been destroyed because of the fire economy, right? to go ahead and give them a purpose, start working so they can cover some of their basic needs and necessities. But this is what I think we're heading. And Europe is I mean, apart from Germany, if the Germans ever wake up and decide, hey, we're not going to sell our manufacturing birthright down the river, if they ever decide to fight for that, I think Germany could come out of this pretty good as well. France, maybe. I'm not so sure about them, but everybody else is a lost cause in Europe, pretty much. Canada also will be affected if Canada, you guys have the same fight we do, and I think if Canada is sitting on a great deal of mineral wealth, one of the most mineral rich countries with natural resources on the planet is Canada. So we face the same monster, Matt.
Oh, yeah, no, across the board, natural gas, oil, uranium, lithium, you name it. I mean, Canada, especially the untapped material in the north and the Arctic Yukon. And this is also the sort of thing that Trump was trying to do before he left with his executive order to build rail between the lower 48 states through Alberta into the Yukon, the north, and into Alaska that would have connected up into the already developing Far Eastern and Arctic Eurasian policy of Russia, China, India, which are all looking heavily at exploiting and developing the vastly underdeveloped and hugely rich Arctic zone of Russia with rail shipping lines. So that's all stuff that is definitely, I can testify for sure, is part of the discussion in back channel meetings in all sorts of domains. So highly, highly potent potential way to rebuild and reconstruct over the long term. But I loved your example of the plane having two choices of either the smacking into the mountain or potentially, not comfortable, but still survivable soft landing in a rice paddy. I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that from you. Hope you don't mind. We're going to go for a short commercial break. We'll be right back on TNTRadio.live.
De-weaponizing weather with reality and perspective.
Remember when you were in math class and they told you to check your work? You do remember that, right? Let's say you have 5 minus 3 and that equals 2. You want to check your work, go, well, take the answer 2, add 3, it equals 5. Correct. Right? Well, you can work backwards when checking your work when it comes to why the planet is warming. At least I can with my hypothesis that this is geothermal. In other words, the input of extra energy from what is going on in the bottom of the ocean. How can I do that? Well, let's take a look at what's going on. There's less cloudiness in the tropics now. We all know that clouds are formed by the air going up, right? So that means there must not be as much air going up. Why would that be? Well, if we went from the North Pole to the South Pole, we had an average vertical velocity, and because of the normal distribution of temperature, the greatest vertical velocity, so where it's warm and moist, which would be the tropical oceans, then we'd have a certain distribution, right? Well, what happens when that distribution is disturbed by distortion? In other words, it's warming more in the north and it's warming more in the south than it is in between. Well, guess what? Less vertical velocity, less clouds. Less clouds, more sun hitting the ocean. More sun hitting the ocean, more outgoing long-wave radiation. So this is being observed now. The mistake being made by people on my part of the argument, in my opinion, is that they believe that that is the tail wagging the dog. It's not. The dog that wags the tail is the input of geothermal energy. That warms the oceans, that puts the water vapor into the atmosphere, leads to distortion, leads to the difference in the vertical velocity patterns. So you see, right in front of you, I checked my work on his hypothesis. This is TNT climate and weather watchdog meteorologist Joe Bastardi asking you to enjoy the weather. It's the only weather you got.
I didn't ask to be thrown in the streets with nowhere to go, but I did ask for help, and Covenant House was there for me.
1 in 10 young adults will experience a form of homelessness this year. For these kids who didn't ask to be put in this unthinkable situation, Covenant House is there, providing hot meals, a safe place to sleep, medical care, and love.
They just really genuinely just wanted to help me succeed, and I'm succeeding.
To learn more, go to safeplacetosleep.org today.
You're listening to Connecting the Dots with Matt Ehret on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
All right, we're back with the third segment of the first hour of Connecting the Dots. V, you were recently just going through, before we went into a commercial break, over what would be a rational type of approach to the oncoming collapse that was brought upon by ourselves, not Iran, not Nicaragua, not Venezuela, not China. These are a lot. There's a lot of smoke screens to try to give us a hate image to avoid self-examining our own faults and to find fault in some other enemy image, the Jews, whatever. There's so many things that have been created as hate absorbers so that we don't actually deal with cleaning up our own backyard here. You made a point though that we need shovel-ready mega infrastructure projects that could help revive the real economy. Now, a lot of people might hear what you just said and say, oh, that sounds like Ursula von der Leyen and the Green New Deal crowd talking about building green infrastructure, Green New Deals. Ursula just said we need $620 billion per year for the green transition. How is what you've just said, which does sound like a New Deal type of approach to creating jobs, creating the real economy versus this Green New Deal? What is the difference in your mind? How would you respond to people who have this misgiving or are worried based on the outward form of what you said?
Yeah, I'd be happy to explain that. Westerners have no idea what economics is. Westerners have no idea that they live in a fake economy. Okay? Westerners don't understand this, and this is what I need people to get. We have what is known as the FIRE economy here in the United States and all over the Western world. Okay, what is the FIRE economy? Finance, insurance, real estate. Okay? Finance, insurance, and real estate. That is the FIRE economy. In other words, it's the speculative economy. In a healthy country, you would want maybe 10, maybe 15% of your entire economic output, maybe 20 at the most, to be a FIRE economy, to have the finance, insurance, or the speculative aspect of it. 15%, maybe 20, but I'm really stretching it to 20. But 10, 15%, that's good. That's healthy. It's good. Mm-hmm. The rest you want manufacturing and services. Okay? That's what you want. Because that's the physical economy. Manufacturing, goods and services, and then 10, 15%, maybe 20% you want the speculative, the banking, the financial side of things, right? Mm-hmm. In the US and in the Western world, it is completely lopsided. It is inverted. The majority of our economy, over 80 some odd percent of it, is all speculative. When you have the majority of your economy that is all speculative, what occurs is that your manufacturing and your physical economy becomes a cottage industry of the larger financial economy. Case in point, Boeing. This is fresh in everybody's mind, so I'll bring it up. We've had a door blown out on a 737 MAX. Prior to that, we had the 787 Dreamliner that's been grounded because it's been, it's spent more time on the ground than in the air because it's been grounded several times because of all sorts of issues with this hybrid technology, right? And all this green crap that they put onto the plane. You've had several other issues with the Boeing 777X, which is being delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. It's not even seeking service. What happened to Boeing? Boeing went from an engineering company that was grounded on solid engineering prowess to a company that is obsessed with its stock price. The FIRE economy is what happened to Boeing. The FIRE economy is what happens to General Motors. The FIRE economy is what leads to nonsense like electric vehicles. So what is different between what I say and what von der Leyen says? I am for the physical economy. I am for this because I understand that the wealth of a nation is not created on a trading floor on Wall Street. It is created on the factory floor. That's the difference. A physical economy with real energy, real solutions, real wealth, real prosperity versus one. And this is why, look, you could never have, and this is why the financial collapse is so important, guys. You could never have a healthy manufacturing base and a physical economy while the FIRE economy lives, because the FIRE economy is a parasitic drain on the physical economy. It's a parasitic drain. You need to quell that beast. You need to tame that dragon. Otherwise, it will burn you alive and destroy everything that your country has built. This is what Thomas Jefferson says. I fear that we will wake up in a land that the forefather, our sons and daughters wake up in a country where corporations and banks run on everything, they ruin everything, they destroy their future and their birthright on a land, on a country that their forefathers fought to free. And that's exactly what's happening. We've allowed speculators. Folks, let me explain something to you. The United States is not a $37 trillion economy. Majority of that, there was a time when I could have said 50% of that was reshuffled debt. I would say today 80% of it is reshuffled debt. We're really maybe a $3, maybe a $5 trillion, maybe $7 trillion economy at most. And this is why the FIRE economy is a delusional economy. It makes you believe you're in BS. It makes you think that you can go fight a conventional war against the Russians and win. And then when reality hits home, when you don't have any munitions, where you don't have any firepower, where you don't have any sort of military projection, and the only thing you can do when a bunch of Houthi rebels start taking on and bullying your ships, putting your foreign policy against the wall, the only thing you can do is to knock on the Chinese door. And Jake Sullivan saying, could you please help us out? The comment of the Houthis now. What happened, Jake? I thought you were a superpower. I thought America was a superpower. I thought we were the city on the hill. We're asking the Chinese to help. Why? Because we understand the criminal elements within the United States understands that if they get into a war, a greater regional war, the United States will be exposed for what it is, a weak, fake charlatan. In a conventional war, the United States will probably last about 2 weeks against the Russians. 2 weeks. We do not have the industrial production to fight a war. We do not have the industrial production to make toilet paper during a pandemic. We don't have that. But here we are, Westerners thinking, we're the largest economy in the world. If you went to a third-tier city in China, you Westerners, I ask you to do this. Go to a third tier, not a first tier, because the first tier you might vaporize. Like what happened in that movie, The Avengers Endgame, when Thanos snapped his fingers, you vaporize into dust. But if you just go to a third-tier city and you looked at the infrastructure, your heads would explode. You will lose control of your bowels because you've been lied to. You've been living as a third-rate citizen in your own country. You don't even realize it. All the time you're beating your chest talking about how free you are. That's the difference, folks. You want America to be great. You want Canada to be great. You want Europe to be great. You have to kill the FIRE economy. You have to pour some water on it with real liquidity, real solvency, real solutions, and a physical economy. That's the answer, Matt.
The physical economy. I love that righteous fire that you just like tap into when you get at the pulpit. That's good. No, it's really good. No, I think that that's the key thing, that it's true. Most people don't tend to think about the physical reality, because if you have a Green New Deal, that might create what appears to be a spike in jobs for a period, but at the same time, the effect of those jobs having been worked to tear down hydroelectric plants that might create jobs. It takes people to tear down hydroelectric plants that were built up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and it takes jobs to build windmills. Those things are big, the size of a Boeing 747. So if you want to build thousands of these all across former farmland, you might make jobs, but the quality of the physical economy will be destroyed, because the quality of energy that will be given to you by no hydroelectric dams, by windmills and solar panels, is so crap, poor, unreliable, and low quality that you won't be able to fire up and maintain any heavy industry. You won't be able to have anything that will have a productive power that will allow you to survive or sustain your people. So it's really an illusion. So I think what you just said is really, really important, because it's a different paradigm in thinking about reality. Now, based on what you said, we have a short little segment left here, 6 minutes or so. You just touched on something that I think is important to maybe, I'd like to get your words. Many people want to blame China and for all of our problems. We alluded to it. Now, on the one hand, you have, Sullivan and freaks from the U.S. deep state begging China to come in and help them on the Yemen issue and the Red Sea. On the other hand, you have NATO and the U.S. military industrial complex spreading up and building a missile shield around China, provoking separatist movements in and around China, provoking essentially war. It's very, very off kilter. It's hard for people to think about, and a lot of people, they simply say, "Oh, well, the fact that China has the productive industry is the only evidence they need," or the fact that Blinken or others are asking China to help on the Red Sea is evidence that China is running America, is controlling America, or that the border crisis, that's run by China, that's trying to destroy America through immigration. So there's all sorts of different narratives that have been created to try to make it seem that, well, that's why China took our industry. They did that as a big trick to destroy us, and now they're the productive power. So what do you say in response to these voices that are just very, very
They're
prevalent?
idiots. They are freaking idiots. And this is what I want the point that folks, you hear this all the time in Western media. Blah, 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 blah. Look, most Westerners don't have a passport. Most Westerners never traveled abroad. Most Westerners don't even take the time to understand the cultures and the countries in which they travel to or they do business in. It's very unfortunate, okay? Folks, you got to understand China. China is a very they're a merchant class of people. They're about doing business. The business of China is business. Okay, people have said the business of America is business. No, the business of America is fraud. That's what we do. Business of China is business. In terms of stealing industry, the United States makes it appear that the China's the only one that does industrial espionage. Folks, industrial espionage occurs within American companies, and they do it to themselves. And the United States does industrial espionage overseas all the time. Everybody does it. Okay, so for us to put on this saintly attire and say, well, industrial espionage, they're stealing our technology. Really? There are technology in China that's existed for several years that the United States has claimed that they stole from us, and we don't even see it here in the United States. So where is it? Where is it? It's when the United States was screaming about, oh, they stole 5G. Well, China's deployed 5G decades ago. United States, the 5G is still kind of rolling out. It still sucks. It's still crap. So where's this? Oh, they stole our technology. That's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense, folks. Let me tell you something. It doesn't benefit China to follow the American or the British model of world conquest. It doesn't benefit them. It doesn't benefit China to have a weak America. It benefits China to have an economically strong and robust and vibrant America in order for China to do business with. It benefits China to have an industrious and prosperous West. This is the mentality that the Westerners don't understand. China's done everything to say, hey, you know what? Guys, slow down on this war thing. Hey, you know what? Your rhetoric is a little too out there. Hey, this Paris Climate Accord, we're not too crazy about it. I think this is a little overblown, this whole climate change stuff, right? People don't understand. It's like people conflate Western elites with the Chinese. They are not the same. They do not like each other. They tolerate each other, and the Chinese side is willing to work with them. But the West is zero-sum game. Why? Because they're a bunch of, sad to put it, they're a bunch of old dudes who have some very serious racist views on how the rest of the world is. I mean, you can hear the what's the guy, the president of the EU, Joseph Borrell. Borrell talking about EU being the great garden that must be pruned and protected, and the rest of the world's a jungle. Oh yeah, Borrell.
Yeah, and that the garden must go out into the jungle and spread more garden and tame the jungle.
Spread more gardens. Insanity. It's there's and I know it's an overplayed word, but there is, when you look at the European Western elites and stuff, there's a lot of racism. Racist towards Russians, racist towards any non-Anglo, Northern European stuck. And it's insanity. It's a detriment. And the rest of the world's woken up, man. It's woken up. And
it seems like a controlled dualism of that's been created between the hyper woke liberal left that feels that they can't judge anything as being right or wrong. Everything is equally right, which means nothing is right, because if everything is right, nothing is right, and there's no gender, right. There's no such thing as nation state. That's just a Western construct. So you've got this hyper liberalism, which is behind the justification for mass unbounded immigration into every country, including illegals that should become increasingly, there's justifications to make them part of the police forces, let them vote, all this stuff. Even if you're illegal, And then on the other hand, of course, you're going to get a response, which will be very predictable, of hyper conservatism to the point of it being very toxic, of starting to see, well, it's sort of like the Nazi structure that was the thing that absorbed a lot of the right wing reaction to the hyper George Lukács Frankfurt School Bolshevism of the 1919-1920 period. Yeah. That was trying to bring sex education, all this liberal stuff into the school systems. And they were like, no. And then, of course, it got so crazy that you create a polarization. So you got these two different things. And we're playing the same, we're being played by the same fiddles, by the same strings, the same musical tunes, like we that led us into World War I, World War II. So V, I mean, you've gone through a lot. Thank you so much for this. If people want to follow more of your material, follow Rogue News, what do they do? Or Amparo, what do they do?
Yeah, you can go to find us on X at Rogue News Events, Rogue News Events on X. You can also check it out on roguenews.com. The site's going through a revamp. We'll be relaunching the site probably in another week or two. It's going to be awesome. And then Rumble, YouTube, and whatnot. You can find us at Rogue News TV. And then Amparo, if you need precious metals, you need digital assets, contact us, amparoandco.com. We will help you.
All right, thank you, V. All right, we're going to come back for our next segment with Ed Lazansky on Connecting the Dots on TNT Radio. Stay tuned on TNTRadio.live.